Hey babies, it's your favorite host, Mr. BMG, back at it again with another episode. Let's get into it. Anyway, babies, I hope you have had an amazing week and have been doing what makes your heart full. So I was on the streets of the internet, as per usual, particularly the neighborhood talk, because I like to keep my ear to the ground handy to see what's going on. And I came across Angela Oakley's husband, Charles Oakley, speaking to a person who was interviewing him, and he was essentially mentioning how he met Angela and essentially how they fell in love, and he gave a very sarcastic and meaningful response, in my opinion. I think he allegedly said that he was under the influence when they met, or he was allegedly drugged, or something to the effect of not taking accountability for his feelings towards this woman. And I guess in some context this could have been considered humorous, and maybe he intended it as being, quite humorous, but I don't think it was received that way. He eventually followed up with Angela and kind of tried to explain his way out of what he was saying versus into what he meant to say, and essentially trying to course correct the narrative. But I don't know if that was received though, because I think people always kind of take what they want. Like if you show them the hand the first time, even if you try and soften it up the next time, they're going to believe the first thing that you show them no matter what, and then they kind of anchor you to that the whole time. So I wouldn't be surprised if Charles Oakley will always be seen as the douchebag husband to Angela, to the dear sweet Angela Oakley darling, the new star of the Housewives. Think about, does Angela want to make her husband seemingly look unattractive to the public so that she doesn't have to deal with, infidelity or dealing with people throwing themselves onto her husband? Could it be that tactic? Could it be not just Angela, but could it be him wanting to come across as not very approachable or not very a guy to lust and aspire to? Do you know what I mean? So it could be very calculated on both parts. Actually, them trying to course correct, I don't think that people received that. And the fact that Angela was kind of sitting in front of him, almost looking like she was indirectly forcing him to apologize to the public so that they can be received how he meant it, or to maintain the image. I don't think people received that. Does he love Angela? We don't know. Only Angela really knows that. From what he gives off to the public, it doesn't seem that way, but is the public being too sensitive? There are people who say, well, this guy, haven't you guys come across an uncle like this who is old school, doesn't really know how to speak their emotions, and, only shows their love through, I guess, acts of service, but not necessarily words of affirmation. From my experience with these housewives, right, they often start off defending their husbands. They always, let's use Portia as probably the perfect example of this. Portia came into season 5 being a trophy wife. Basically everything people would expect to see from a woman who's married a prominent man in society, and would defend him at any cost and would stand by him even when he talked reckless and overtly tried to control her and overtly talked down on her. He would stand by her man and excuse it or laugh it off and all of that stuff. But there was an element of fierce protection and, I'm going to stand by this person no matter what they do. But that all came to shit when at some point, the behavior that, this person you're defending can't be excused anymore, and things start to come out that are very inconsistent to the image that you've been trying to keep up, and all of a sudden it's very impossible to defend this person, and you're forced to sort of now tell the truth about the person. It happened again with Simon. She defended their relationship at the beginning very much, yay, we're good, we're nice. And for the most part, I've never really seen her talking bad about their relationship. She's always tried to maintain or save face, even with Dennis, always tried to maintain and save face until the embarrassment was, again, too obvious to even ignore, to the point where only a dumb person can believe. So I feel like with Angela, I'm hoping this is not the case, but the storyline is kind of leaning towards that, we're happy, I'm going to advocate for my husband, I don't want the publicity to ruin my relationships, I'm going to protect it even if there are cracks in it. And the other time she did mention, though, I think, and I remember when I think she mentioned that words of affirmation are one of her love languages. If you're going to say that that's one of your love languages, but the very person who should be endorsing and loving you like nobody else does not have that quality or characteristic, then there's definitely an emptiness and a void there that can't be ignored, no matter how you try to spin it that, or to try to convince yourself that this person loves you. There's obviously an element of maybe he's just not that into you. I really just hope it's not the same story. I really hope that they have a funny way of showing that they love each other. While we're in the realm of triggering things being said that make us question what people really think of us, right? I came across this interesting story of essentially Trump in a conference of sorts, and there were African leaders there, and he was kind of complimenting their English. And for some reason, I got triggered in that moment I wonder how the person who was being complimented about the English received it. If they received it as a compliment, I thought about every time that's happened to me, how I felt in that circumstance. I've never really felt good in that moment because it sounds like a backhanded compliment, right? And for me, it just opened up a can of bigger worms of, this is just one example of how this happens in, commonly, when, particularly in the United States, right? So if you don't necessarily have an American accent and you still speak very well, and you don't have, the twang, the affectation, that whole personality accent thing, which in my mind is not really an accent, to be honest. Like, sometimes I'm just waiting for people to switch it off. Like, okay, so when are you going to start talking properly and we can have like a serious conversation? You look at the person I am, you make assumptions and stereotypes about my background, my level of education, how I speak, how I come across. And those assumptions aren't consistent to who I actually am and how I actually come across and how I speak. And you're exposing that you had an ignorant perception about me that doesn't hold up because of the fact that I'm the bitch that I think that I am. Now you're almost shook and you have to hold on to your wig. You're unable to reconcile and compute this person that you're coming across who says that they're from this place and they're from Africa, but why are they so proper? Because we are. I'm not a singular deviation from the trend. There's a lot of people who are educated. It shows how little you expect of that person. And in them just doing the bare minimum, which is to speak and be well spoken, you think that they've changed the world for the type of person that they are, when really it's the least of my capabilities. So Justin Bieber has a new album called Swag, and the reception has been mixed. Well, obviously because of just the volume of people who follow him, anything that he kind of does will project and be noticed by a lot of people. I don't think this is his best work. I don't think it will be his best work. I don't think the timing was right. But maybe this was always the plan, because a lot of people have been talking about Justin Bieber lately, right? It's the whole, it's not clocking to you meme, it's the whole, his relationships with different people, unlikely people, like Sexy Red with Ghana. He was at the gym with Ghana. He has all these very bizarre relationships. I think he had a call with Lil Wayne. Like, there's a lot of random relationships and people around him who I feel like aren't necessarily, it's acquaintances, yes, it's people that he knows maybe within the industry, but it's like very unlikely pairings. And essentially people have been talking about Justin Bieber for many different reasons. But for the most striking and the most obvious reason is because he looks gaunt. He looks, like he's just going through the last thing that people are thinking about is an album. Like, it's just so random. I know he's a musician, but like, really, new music, I just think he just needs to get better somehow. I just think he needs to shift his focus, his energy, but be surrounded by people who actually have the best interest for him. I think he's still kind of cosplaying as a black R&B artist till this day, child. Woo! Like, he's kind of a modern day Justin Timberlake in some ways, but in my mind he's just he's like a white version of Chris Brown, and I just think it's not working. I just think he just needs to like redirect his energy into his own personal healing, find out who he is outside of who he's trying to play to the public. There's still culture vulture tactics, which I don't condone, because I think at some point he'll be done being a white version of Chris Brown, and then what? Are we going to receive black culture when it's fed to us by a white person? And even just a shift of perspective. Chris Brown has had, they're not the same people, right? But they've had very turbulent personal lives. But for some reason, Chris Brown is villainized, and Justin Bieber is kind of seen as a victim. And I guess that's also to do with the perception of how society sees black men versus white men. But it just looks like society victimizes Justin Bieber for everything he finds himself in, and almost jointly does not take accountability for where he's at. And so if no one takes accountability and they're encouraging him to be a victim in all of the whole situation that he finds himself in, then he's going to do just the same thing, So I think there needs to be a shift in that too, in how he's seen to the public, and that he needs to take accountability for all of that. I can't compare him to Chris Brown by any stretch. As much as we do, we can't. Not in talent-wise. It's not clocking to me, Justin Bieber. It's not clocking to me, sweetie. Lucy Liu will be joining The Wears Prada 2. That's the second installment of the movie, which is now in production. And I'm pretty excited about that because Lucy Liu is such a gorgeous Asian woman and has been in roles that you would associate her with fashion. I think she was in Dirty Sexy Money, I'm trying to remember. But she's been in these interesting movies where she's kind of played a little beautiful sort of female kitten heroine woman. Charlie's Angels, I think, is probably her most iconic role to this day, child. Her, Drew Barrymore, and Cameron Diaz. So it'll be interesting to see her, what she'll bring to the table in Devil Wears Prada. Is she going to be the new editor? I do see her being in some type of glamorous fashion, authoritative fashion capacity, and perhaps she's an editor of a rival magazine, perhaps she is the new editor of Allure or whatever the magazine was, I think. And she's got this quiet humor where she's almost not really too funny, but sometimes her demeanor makes her funny. So I think she was on Ugly Betty as well. Maybe now I'm just thinking about things, but she was on these interesting shows when we were all growing up, and she definitely has a likability to her. So I'm excited to see how that's going to play out. So to end off on a musical note, as I always try to, we have some new music from Tyla. You know, she just released this cute little song called Is It, and we also have some interesting music from Ayra Starr, Hot Body, very good as well. And it's very interesting to see how these girls play off of each other, you know. And I came across this little post online, and it was kind of saying, in reference to Ayra Starr, poor girl, they stole her look and, you know, basically everything that kind of made her, and kind of used that on Tyla to sort of scale. And it actually had 3 million views and lots and lots of likes, and it looks like there is some sentiment towards, I guess, by the general public opinion, that this may be true. But for me, it was more timelines in which they both kind of blew up is where I always kind of had like a Essentially, Rush by Ayra Starr, which was kind of her breakout hit, came out before Water. It didn't come out too long before Water came out, but it did have a run, like a solid run, you know, before Water came out. It was a huge song, is a huge song to this day, and kind of positioned her as a big girl in the industry, as the next big Afrobeats girly in the industry. And soon after that, it looks like obviously Water came out and kind of eclipsed everything that they set her up to be. I feel like Water eclipsed all of that and then some with how it was pushed. Tyla basically received all of these awards in the space of a year and had the recognition of the machine, really, and the endorsement of the machine, to the point where you almost had to think and had to know that Ayra Starr exists and remind yourself that she does exist, and she had all of the success by Rush, because I almost feel like the success that Water has and the success that Rush has, they were both really big songs from an African point of view, you know. But Rush, I don't think it got that many flowers. It didn't get that much flowers. Even though when you look at the viewership online, they almost have a very similar viewing. Like, they're both songs within, I think, 300 million range of views. I think there's enough space for both of them to be celebrated. I think they're both great artists in their own rights. Do I think there's copycat culture? Yes, I think different artists borrow from different people. Do I think directly Tyla copied Ayra Starr? That's debatable. We'll never really know, because for me, personally, I think Tyla allegedly, or may have actually, referenced a lot of the underground South African queer culture that was happening, you know, and how those people dressed. When I think of how Tyla dresses, I always think of how those girlies from The Birth of Stars, Gamma Worldwide, Coachella Randy, Kagiso, those girls, I always think of how they dress and how those androgynous, queer, unapologetic girlies in the community have always represented themselves in the new age, like the new Gen Z queer girlies. They literally dress like Tyla. If you put your ear to the ground, you will see. Well, this girl actually referenced her look to the queer kids, like to the underground girlies, the experimental, androgynous girlies who are like really always on the cusp of all of the interesting, cool trends before they become mainstream. At Lachey is Tyla's choreographer. Lachey has ties to The Birth of Stars as well, because Lachey, I think allegedly, is friends with Orapeleng Modutle. Orapeleng Modutle was kind of like managing The Birth of Star girlies and was executive producing their reality show. So you see where I'm going with this. You see the interconnection of the relationship between Orapeleng Modutle, and Orapeleng Modutle is managing these girls. Orapeleng Modutle is also kind of styling and essentially taking care of these girls from an image perspective type of way, and nurturing them. And they all have this aesthetic, this avant-garde, you know, aesthetic about them, streetwear, but make it high fashion type of look. More than them, even, when I think about The Birth of Stars girlies, the people who were kind of doing it before them, you think of Lasizwe, because Lasizwe kind of, from, I guess, a South African perspective, I always want to say gave birth to a lot of these streamers that you see, the younger queer generation of content creators, your Banele, Girlings, you know, those people, and the wave of people that came after that, your Gamos and Coachellas and all those people. There were a wave that came after Lasizwe's wave, and Lasizwe was also a person who would experiment with androgynous looks, wearing those Sam HD wigs with, you know, that aesthetic of, like, you almost look like a little tennis girly, but like with a sense of street style, and, you know, wearing cutouts, tops with cutouts and really many skirts, ponytails, and just this cute, slinky, cat-like energy. And before them, obviously, there were other people who inspired them to dress like that and do that and essentially kind of have that image. But what I'm trying to say is there's a lot that's happening within the queer underground culture that influences the mainstream. But I do think, yes, of course, they definitely reference each other. Not necessarily musically, because I appreciate them for different things. Like, yes, they're both African musicians, but I think they have different sounds and I appreciate them for different things. You know, one being more Afrobeats, one being more has a foundation of amapiano, but it's kind of evolving into popular music to, I guess, appeal to a very broad audience. Yeah, some of the summer continues. Also, Burna Boy released his album No Sign of Weakness, and he's also going on tour soon, which is very exciting. And the song that stands out from, you know, his new body of work is definitely Sweet Love. Sweet Love is so reminiscent of reggae, soft reggae music, reggae soul. You know, it feels like Caribbean music infused with Afrobeats. And again, while we're on this whole thing of influence and, you know, feeling like we've seen something before or something is taken from something, Afrobeats and Caribbean music, by Caribbean music I mean your dancehalls, your reggaes, your soccas, and all of these interesting genres of music, there's so many similarities in it. If you didn't know those genres, you hear an Afrobeat song, you think it's a reggae song, you think it's a dancehall song or something like that, or calypso, whatever. You would think it's island music because the cultures are very similar, you guys. Caribbean people are African people in ancestry. So the taste in the music, and if you think of Nigerian pidgin versus Jamaican patois and all the other dialects that are sort of floating within the Caribbean, so many similarities. We are all one people, we are all black people, we are all Africans. Music will evolve in different ways, in different parts where we find ourselves, but the DNA of it will always remain the same, and it's African. And that's the beauty of it for me, because when I hear of Sweet Love, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is beautiful. It almost kind of feels like a Wizkid song as well, because it's so soulful, and Wizkid loves to make these soulful jams. And on the contrast with Burna Boy, a lot of his music is high energy. It's like, let's groove, let's party. You know, so that Sweet Love song is very slow tempo and very sensual. You almost like, for me, it's almost like he's kind of going into the grown-up era with his music, and he's growing with his music, and maybe saying that it's not all about partying and like living a fast life. It's about the sweet love, you know. So I think it's a beautiful song, and No Sign of Weakness, you know, clearly is a sign that he's not slowing down anytime soon, and there is no sign of weakness in his fame and, you know, the reach that his music has had and will continue to have. So really beautiful, and yeah, hope the music and hope the album does obviously well. Anyway, babies, I hope you've enjoyed this episode of The Laziest Bitch on the Internet. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and also follow us on Instagram at BigMoneyEntertainment_, and I'll see you again on the next one.